promised for you and for me. Though we have sinned, He has mercy and pardon, pardon for you and for me. Come home, come home. We who are weary, come home. Earnestly, tenderly, Jesus is calling, calling, oh sinner, come Come home, come home, come home. Ye who are weary, come home. Earnestly, tenderly, Jesus is calling, calling, oh sinner, come home. Calling, oh sinner, come home.
This morning, I would like to talk briefly from this topic, loving like Jesus. One day, Jesus was with his disciples, and he asked them a question. He said, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" He was asking them, "Who do people say I am?" And his disciples responded, "Some say that you are John the Baptist. Others say that you are Elijah, and still there are others who say that you are Jeremiah or one of the prophets." Then Jesus turns the question from public to personal, and he asks his disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" And then Peter, who is found and known to be the leader of the disciples, speaks up and says, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." The difference between Peter's answer and the answers of the people is that Peter actually listened to Jesus and believed. And this is the difference between a disciple and an observer. A disciple follows the teacher, seeking to learn with the expectation of believing what is taught, whereas an observer takes notice, doesn't inquire any further, but jumps to their own conclusions. When we follow Jesus, seeking to learn from him so that we might believe his message and believe in him, God will reveal to that person that Jesus is who he says he is. And Jesus says it is upon this belief in God's revelation that he will build his church. The church is not a building. The church is made up of people who believe that Jesus is who he says he is. If you were asked a question today, who is Jesus to you? How would you respond? There are many who have answers that are known throughout the public, but who is Jesus to you? If we are like the disciples who are learning from Jesus and putting into practice what he teaches, it means that we have to believe him for who he says he is. And Jesus says out of his own mouth that he is the Son of God and that God has made him Lord. Now, when Jesus says that he is Lord, he is declaring that God has given him authority over everything that belongs to God. Anything that God created, anything that is seen or unseen, God has put under the authority of the Son. And we can see this throughout the Gospels by Jesus' power in being able to speak to God's creation and it respond. Jesus is telling us that he is one who has come and he is Lord. And if we are to believe him for who he says he is, then that means that we believe that Jesus is Lord. Now, there is a difference between saying that Jesus is Lord and Jesus is my Lord. When we say that Jesus is my Lord, we are saying that Jesus has supreme authority over my life. Now, this is no small statement. For a person who says that they are now a disciple of Jesus Christ and he is their Lord, it signifies that they have been changed, that they no longer live for their own desires. They no longer live to fulfill their own will, but now they live to fulfill what pleases the Lord. They live to do what the Lord has commanded because he is the one who has supreme authority over their lives. In the beginning of this 13th chapter in John's gospel, Jesus shows and tells his disciples what it is that he commands of them. Jesus is with his disciples in a secluded place. They have just finished a meal, and there the Lord of creation, the one who has oversight over all that belongs to God, unrobes himself, takes up a towel, girds himself, fills a basin with water, and then gets down and begins to wash his disciples' feet. Once he finishes cleansing them, washing their feet, he gets up, he puts back on his robe, and then he looks at them and he says, "Do you know what it is that I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right because that is who I am. And if I am your Lord and your teacher, and I have washed your feet, so you are to wash the feet of one another." Jesus is superior. Jesus is Lord. He is above his disciples, but here Jesus gets down and sets an example of what he expects of his disciples. And with this example, Jesus summarizes his whole earthly life. He came to serve. Jesus humbled himself to do what it was that God commanded of him. And he did it even when it didn't feel good. He did it when he was overlooked. He did it when it was uncomfortable because Jesus knew his position in his Father's heart. Jesus knew that the Father loved him, and so he submitted himself unto God and God's will, even though it didn't feel comfortable. Jesus submitted himself, and now by washing his disciples' feet, Jesus lets his disciples know their position, and he also instructs them on their posture that they are to have toward one another. He lets them know that I love you just as the Father loves you. I love you just as the Father loves me. And then he sends them forth to serve in the same way the Father has sent Jesus forth to serve. Now, Jesus has set the example for his disciples by washing their feet, and he goes on to say that you are my disciples and you cannot say that you are greater than me, which means that if we call ourselves disciples, we can't say that we're too good to get down on the ground and wash the feet of our fellow brothers and sisters. I was doing some research this week, and I found some statistics on the Pew Research Center. And did you know that 70% of Americans identify as Christian? whether that be through Protestant belief or through Catholic belief, 70%. Now, you bring home a 70% on a test to the house, you may not get extra dessert, but it's relative. And when you think of 70% in the midst of a population, that is what we call a majority. Now, with that number in mind, I'm going to ask you the question I've been asking myself. Does it look as if 70% of the population are followers of Christ? Does it look like 70% of the population have learned from Jesus and are putting into practice what Jesus taught? Either Jesus is just a figurehead and not Lord, or the church has forgotten Jesus' example. Either he's not Lord, or either we forgot his example, but there's no way we can say that 70% of the population are following Christ. Because when I see what goes on in society, my question is, where are the rags? Where are the towels? Where's the grace? Where's the humility to get down and wash those who are around us? You know, I believe that the church is the most powerful institution in the world. Reason being is because it is the only institution on earth that Jesus said he will build and sustain. But my friends, I have to tell you, I believe that the church has played a major role in the dysfunctional dialogue that we see in public. Though the church is sponsored by Christ and is uplifted by Christ, the church has compromised the message of Christ for the convenience of people, for crowds, and for cash. And I believe that the compromise of the church has found its way to impact society at large because the church is just that influential. And you know what is interesting? Is that the originator, the founder of the church, Jesus the Christ, knew that everyone would not follow him. He knew that everyone would not take his teachings to heart and put them into practice. And there were many opportunities that he had to compromise his message for the sake of something else, and he refused to do it. Don't you know it was the devil who tried to get him to compromise his message for the sake of influence and power? It was his family who tried to get him to compromise his message for the sake of public image. And it was even his disciples who walked with him, who wanted him to compromise his message for the sake of personal safety. And in every case, Jesus didn't stop. He didn't compromise. And what he tells his disciples then and what he tells us now is that if you are truly my disciple and you do what I tell you to do, and you live how I tell you to live, the world will hate you. And I believe with all my heart that for the sake of having people in attendance and maintaining or building a budget, the church has compromised the gospel of Jesus Christ. Maybe you know a little bit about this church culture. Well, we don't talk about that here. We don't talk about politics here. We don't talk about sexuality here. We don't talk about race here. We don't talk about poverty here, nor do we talk about the oppressive systems. We don't talk about all of that. All we want you to talk about is what we want to hear. And if you step out of bounds and begin to talk about those things that we don't want to hear, you're going to have a problem. What kind of problem? You're going to have an or else problem. Preach what it is that we want you to preach rather than the gospel, or else Sister Wealth is going to take back her money. Stay within the confines of what is comfortable, or else Brother Influence is going to spread a bad report throughout the church. Don't put too much pressure on people to think about what's going on outside of the church walls, because if you do, you're going to make them uncomfortable and they're not going to come to church. And so we have softened the gospel. We have sanitized Jesus for the sake of making people comfortable, and I believe that it has impacted society, and this is the greatest consequence, I believe, is that so many who identify with the church believe that Jesus has come to be a part of their agenda, to be a part of their platform, to be a part of their will, rather than realizing that Jesus Christ came to set the agenda and says, whoever will be my disciple must follow me. And so as Lord and Savior, Jesus gives his disciples a new command. He tells them, because I am your Lord, I am giving you something new. And so whatever it is that you have been following up to this point, whoever it is that you've been following up to this point, whatever principles you've been living by, Jesus says, put all of that to the side and listen to what I am commanding you to do if you are my disciple. If you call me Lord, I give you a new command. And I want you to understand how significant it is for Jesus to claim lordship in the biblical context, is that there are people who were on thrones who identified as Lord, some of whom they thought to be divine. And when Jesus claims that he is Lord, he is saying that I have power over whatever authority, whether it be in the Roman government, whether it be in the church. Jesus says, I give you something new to live by, a new way, a new inspiration, a new attitude. Here it is. Are you ready? Love one another. It's so simple that you can miss the power. Jesus commands his disciples to love because love is a choice. All it takes to love is a willingness to do it. And what Jesus says is that this thing that I'm calling you to do, it doesn't matter about ability, it doesn't matter about wealth. All it matters is the willingness to do what I say. And Jesus tells them this is not your type of love. This is not the love of scratching people's back who scratch your back. Jesus says, no, I want you to love. No, I command you to love one another, just as I have loved you. And don't you know, there's nothing about Jesus' love for us that's convenient. Nothing about it is convenient, but he chose to tell us that we were children of God when we thought we were enemies. He chose to share heaven's grace with us when we thought that we were forgotten. He chose to get down and wash our feet. He chose to cleanse our souls by laying his life down on the cross. He chose to do it. And what Jesus is saying is that if you are going to be my disciple and you choose to love the way that I have loved you, what you're really choosing is to bear a cross. It may sound strange that loving is bearing a cross, but it's true, because whenever you love, you can't have an assurance or a promise that those you love will love you back. But Jesus says, this is my command, that you not just love when it feels good to those that you want to love, but you love how I've loved you. Now, this may sound impossible. It may sound difficult to love someone you don't agree with, someone who thinks differently than you, someone who looks differently than you, maybe someone you don't even like. It may seem impossible until you remember Jesus' love for you. Has Jesus' love changed you? Has it washed you of your sin? Has it softened your heart? Has it made you humble. Has Jesus' love for you made any change in your life? And here's the question. If Jesus' love has changed you to become a child of God, if it has changed your heart, if it has changed you from the inside out, why wouldn't it change someone else? Maybe the reason why the church is not displaying the love of Christ is because we have not yet experienced the love of Jesus Christ. Because if we truly believe that his love has changed us, then we will know that we don't have to go to arms. We don't have to fight. We don't have to ridicule. We don't have to do anything that the world teaches to bring about a change. All we have to do is love. And Jesus says, when you really love the way that I have loved you, he says, everyone will know that you are my disciples. They won't know that you're disciples of a local church or the disciples of a religion. If you practice love the way that Jesus loved, people will say, you know the carpenter. And so now let's think about the question that Jesus poses to us, and let's ask ourselves. If you were to ask everyone, not just those who know you, not just those who love you, but everyone, those who observe you from afar, co-workers, friends on Facebook, would they say that you know the carpenter? Would they say that you are a disciple of Jesus Christ? Would they say that you love like Jesus? That's the question we all have to wrestle with. Times are hard. And that's the reason why love is so important.